Welcome back to Watch the Bookerman and to Destination X 2012, the third pay-per-view of the year. And you can see on the screen there we have an 8-match card, which to me looks very, very stacked. A nice variation in the matches as well, and I'm really looking forward to what I think is going to be a very good pay-per-view. I did notice when having a quick look here on this screen though, that our last two Destination X pay-per-views didn't do so well. Now I'm not sure if that's just me forgetting that the standards have been raised, so perhaps a 76 for a pay-per-view and a 71 for a pay-per-view weren't too bad at the times. But I would say that when you look through these cards, they're really strong cards. It's a lot of good matches on there, so perhaps it is just a case of over the years we have raised the bar somewhat. And also you can see there I did go for the X Division title match in the main event last year, which probably we would have had a better rated show if we'd gone with Kurt Angle against Low-Ki, although again that was a bit of a strange year. But we'll go into Destination X 2012 and see if, and I think we will, do a little bit better with this one. And we begin with a video package. We always open the pay-per-views with these, and really I don't have too much to say other than it being a recap and essentially a generic opening pay-per-view package before Mauro Ranallo, Mike Tenay and Taz introduce us to the show. I've just rated it on some of the people who are on tonight's pay-per-view, and they do note that as this is Destination X, the signature event of the X Division, which doesn't really make sense because there's only one X Division match on it, although I think 3 of the 4 men in the main event have held the X Division Championship, so maybe that's where we're going to try and crowbar that in. But we're opening with the X Division Championship match, El Generico defending against the man who won the Super X Cup just a couple of nights ago on Evolve Wrestling, and it's a decent opening match, to be fair. Ibushi doing very well considering that he's only had a handful of matches in the company, and El Generico doing okay. We have seen him do better than that, I think, and as the flag bearer of this division, I would want to see more from him. If you've ever seen the match that these two had, I think it was in Chikara. I'm not sure if they had other matches elsewhere, but that's the match that I've definitely seen, and it was just an athletic spectacle. We went high spots with the booking, but ultimately the signed guy is 9 times out of 10 always going to be the guy who's here as a special guest. But I think it's a fantastic showcase for both men. But El Generico, with a haluva kick, picks up the victory and makes defense number 4 of the X Division Championship. And despite not being a fantastic match or particularly a great performance from Generico, I do think he is continuing to be an absolutely incredible X Division champion. And with what we've got planned for the division in the next few months, without giving anything away, he is in the perfect position for what we have next for him and his potential challengers. After the match, El Generico stands tall. There is possibly a show of respect between Ibushi and El Generico, but the spotlight is certainly on our X Division champion. But credit to the Super X Cup winner, Kota Ibushi. He joins Chris Sabin and Samoa Joe as holders of that very, very prestigious trophy, and we probably would have shown a video package of that as part of the opening package or before the first match. I try and do this when I'm booking a pay-per-view now. I used to do it where I'd put a video package before every single match, but it clutters up your match card. It takes a lot longer to go through, so it's just safe to assume that these recap packages and things are included in the non-wrestling time for matches rather than putting absolutely everything in as a separate segment. However, when it is something that's noteworthy, I will of course include it in, such as this, where earlier today all 4 members of tonight's main event, CM Punk, AJ Styles, Jay Lethal and Jeff Hardy, were shown entering the building, but it was clear that one man in particular, who else, CM Punk, was not happy. Returning to ringside, the commentators talk about an incident this afternoon between CM Punk and Kurt Angle. None of them saw it, but they've all heard about what is being described as an ongoing situation. The commentators say that they will keep the fans updated as they hear news in their headset, but until then, it's just speculation really. Speaking of speculation, this moves us on to the conversation about Kurt Angle's future. He said that he will have a huge announcement to make on Thursday, even though he himself isn't quite sure which direction he's going to go in. And Taz comments here that Kurt Angle has dealt with a lot of pressure at the very highest level throughout his entire professional career, but he really was thrown into the frying pan in this sort of volatile situation that was the formation of Impact Wrestling, and clearly it's getting to him. On one hand, you have the argument that Kurt Angle is simply out of his depth. He's a great wrestler, but he doesn't have those leadership qualities. On the other hand, I think that anybody would struggle with how chaotic the locker room has been since the start of 2012, and it's just really about how competitive this company is. We can wait until Thursday for that because we have a hugely personal tag team match coming up now, and this is, like I say, where you'd put in the recap footage of what we'd seen previously between these two. I do actually have a new gimmick for Jay Lethal because it's been a while since I've looked in shows. I was looking through my roster and just trying to refresh myself with certain things, and I noticed that Jay Lethal, albeit a legendary gimmick, has fans own as his gimmick, and it's not accurate anymore. I've just put his new gimmick as chip on his shoulder because that's basically the best way to describe him at the minute. I'm a bit nervous about going from a legendary gimmick here to what could possibly follow, but got a poor rating, so that is disappointing. Whether the fact that he's now doing a gimmick that's suited to a heel is gonna offset that, I don't know, but that's a shame to see. Disappointing, to be fair. And we get that. Another disappointing match as well, the Briscoes versus Bad Influence, and while it is a regular match, so there's no weapons involved, it is I think I booked it as a Wilde brawl, so that's probably hurt certainly Kazarian and Daniels from their ratings there, and Mark and Jay probably just aren't over enough yet to be able to drag them to a great match. It's a decent match described in the game, but ultimately Frankie Kazarian is pinned when the Briscoe brothers hit the Briscoe device, and Jay Briscoe gets the victory. The Briscoes stand tall following their victory over Bad Influence, and we know that this was a deeply personal thing for Kazarian and Daniels, so it's probably quite a painful loss for them. They were fighting on behalf of their stablemates who were brutally taken out by Jay and Mark Briscoe with beer bottles a few weeks ago, and while the Briscoes have picked up a win and do celebrate, they want to cause even more suffering for Kazarian and Daniels. Kazarian was the one pinned, but they grab Christopher Daniels from the outside, roll him into the ring, and Mark Briscoe, very much in tune with what Jay Briscoe has in mind, heads to the outside and grabs a table. He throws that in, and they are planning to put Daniels through the table when the music of Beer Money hits, making their first appearance since being taken out by Mark and Jay. James Storm and Robert Roode rush down to the ring, preventing any further injury to their stablemates. However, having just been through a grueling match, the Briscoes don't want any of it with Beer Money, roll out the ring and escape up the ramp. So while it's a successful return for Beer Money in one way, in that they've helped out their friends, they don't get their hands on Jay and Mark Briscoe, and of course that's hopefully adding to the heat of this feud, because Beer Money are going to be so fired up after the brutal attack that took them out. Tonight isn't the night that we give them even a little bit of revenge, because the Briscoes do get away, and I've noted in previous videos that the Briscoes were still set as baby faces, and I just kept forgetting to change them. I do need also to change their gimmick. Maybe I'll do a rename of it, because it's essentially the same gimmick but with a heel twist on it. The heel turn of Jay Briscoe hasn't gone well. The heel turn of Mark Briscoe a complete success, so swings and roundabouts there. But a big win for the Briscoes, who we've introduced recently to the program, and who I think can be another one of these unique, interesting tag teams. We've got a very dynamic and diverse tag team division, and of course Beer Money back is always a good thing, strengthening any tag team division in the world. We then go into the Knockouts Championship match, and it is Gail Kim versus Hamada in 12 minutes and 57. Gail Kim does pick up the victory, but actually this is the first time since Hamada's heel turn that she's essentially cost herself. She's undefeated, 2 women coming into these matches with 8-0 records, but Hamada gets cocky. Usually in those 8 previous matches we've seen her beat down her opponents and then decided that she wants to go for more. So there's an argument here that if Hamada would have kept it simple, she could be the Knockouts champion here, but after that series of kicks that she has made one of her trademarks, she goes to add that extra finishing touch. In the hesitation, Hamada is rolled up by Gail Kim, so it is a roll-up defeat, protecting her somewhat, but it is disappointing for that undefeated streak to go for her. But Gail Kim, we are not done with her championship reign just yet, and that's why she was decided as the one to win the match and stay as the Impact Knockouts champion. It was again another decent match, but I am noticing that particularly this first hour hasn't been the strongest, so I'm hoping that the way we build up the card, hopefully getting some more crowd heat and stuff like that, we are going to see a better show as things develop. Hamada is furious after the match because it's not like she's just been hit with a neat defeat and she's sprawled out in the ring. She's still conscious. It's just that she got caught out by that roll up. So perhaps suggesting that things aren't quite over between these two. We then get an interview with Austin Aries, who loses heat to his storyline. This is something that it tends to happen because usually you'll have a couple of minutes for a promo on a pay-per-view, so it should be the last hype for the match coming up. But if you put a 2-minute promo in, then it's going to lose heat to your storyline. So essentially, you're better off not building anything up on your pay-per-view because it's just going to hurt your storyline heat. But I've done it nonetheless because, to be honest, I'm not that bothered about the in-game ratings. Perhaps if this was still planned to be a super long-term game, I'd want to be hitting the heights so that we can continue to grow. But to be honest, my plan is that this series ends at Slammiversary 2012. So if we're getting worse ratings than we would have done, I'm not too fussed. Austin Aries is asked by Jerry Borash how he feels about the stipulation the two men agreed on, where they stated that their stablemates would not be at ringside tonight, and given the history, given how much Austin Aries has lent on outside interference, how does he feel going into this? Aries is actually happy to hear this brought up because he never had any issue with this stipulation, and he points out that while Steve Corino and the Wolves aren't even at the building tonight, he heard earlier on that Tyler Black had brought Claudio Castagnoli and Chris Hero along with him. That tells you all you need to know about the honour of that man. Now, of course, the reason that Tyler Black would bring Castagnoli and Hero to the building is because, for good reason, he doesn't trust Austin Aries, but it does seem that Aries has stuck to his end of the bargain. However, Aries has since been assured that those men have been escorted from the building, and he's sure that that flip-flopping coward Jimmy Jacobs isn't going to risk showing his face and getting taken down by Austin Aries. So very, very confident from the greatest man that ever lived ahead of his one-on-one match with Tyler Black. Danielson and Wolfe then defend their Impact World Tag Team Championships against Steen and London. And again, we have seen better matches involving these guys. London and Steen certainly can do better than that, and Paul London off his game does. It's a little bit disappointing, of course, but it gets the crowd hotter. It's a good match and really good ratings from Wolfe and Danielson, so a 79 isn't something to complain about. We see during the match that Roderick Strong and the Young Bucks, who are backstage, end up in a brawl with Colt Cabana and the Motor City Machine Guns, so I put that in the notes. I just put them as ringside because I didn't want it to say that they'd interfered and attacked people, because they never actually make it to the ring. It's just that we see footage on the screen that is an ongoing incident, and what that tells us is that there is going to be no other outside involvement, and Desmond Wolfe pins Paul London following a jawbreaker lariat, the third successful defense of the tag team championships for these enemies turned partners, Danielson and Wolfe. But we do put over after the match, as they stand tall, that things aren't always plain sailing between these two, because by no means have we ever suggested that they're friends. Bryan has a couple of pointers for Wolfe, and this gets under Desmond Wolfe's skin, so it's not exactly as if they're having a major argument or that we're planting seeds of tension. It's just to further illustrate the gimmick of this tag team, which is essentially that they are two world-class wrestlers who seemingly, when it comes to the bell ringing, work so well together, but in terms of their personalities, in terms of who they are as people, really, they couldn't be more ill-suited to one another. The next match on the night is again a little bit disappointing, but mainly because of what we come to expect from these two guys. Austin Aries has an in-ring performance of 83, Tyler Black has an 80, so it's a disappointment that this doesn't get into the 80s at least, but we see that there was a lack of psychology on display, and maybe a little bit shorter would have suited these guys. We did book it as a steal the show. I don't think they're going to quite do that, but it's a back and forth match. Tyler Black comes out and takes off the eye patch that he's been wearing, so we are saying that he is recovered. Aries nonetheless targets that part of Black, trying to re-injure the eye, but I didn't want that to be sort of a caveat to the match. You want to, if you've bought this pay-per-view, see Austin Aries and Tyler Black wrestle each other in a proper match, not in a match that's worked around Tyler Black's eye. Or maybe some people would have seen that. The lack of psychology on display suggests that maybe we did need a little bit more depth to this match. The finish comes when, on the outside, the steel steps become dislodged Austin Aries throwing Tyler Black into them. He then looks to set up to hit a brainbuster on the steel steps. Of course, this would be legal as it's an incidental environmental use of a weapon rather than actually picking up and swinging at somebody, but Black is able to fight back. Austin Aries is thrown back in the ring and Tyler Black goes to the top rope, protecting himself from whatever move that Tyler Black has planned. Austin Aries sort of grabs the referee, and this also serves the purpose of distracting the referee as Brody Lee comes out from the crowd and goozles Tyler Black, catching him completely off guard and hitting with a chokeslam from the top rope to the steel steps. So an absolutely brutal move there. Tyler Black's back must be in severe pain as he is rolled back into the ring, his back and possibly even his neck, and this is only made worse when Austin Aries picks Tyler Black up in the middle of the ring, hits a brainbuster and picks up the 1, 2, 3. After the match, Brody Lee returns to the ring, Austin Aries having his arm raised, and the Big Rig, as he was dubbed by Steve Corino, stands tall with the greatest man that ever lived, having played a decisive role in the result of this match. The commentators put over that Austin Aries went against his word. The stable mix may not have been there, so the Kings weren't there, Jimmy Jacobs wasn't there, Steve Corino and the American Wolves weren't there, but the New Age of Honor's secret weapon has made his presence felt in the most impactful way. He stands behind Austin Aries, cutting an imposing figure behind the already dangerous competitor. Does Austin Aries really need a huge, violent, wild-looking man behind him, given all the ability that he already has? Nonetheless, this makes him even more of a threat. Not that we necessarily want to draw parallels to bygone eras, but there is a Shawn Michaels Diesel sort of dynamic I can see with these two. We then turn attention to the commentators as they have an update regarding that incident from earlier tonight. So not really great in terms of advancing our storylines, or as I'd hoped this segment would do, adding heat to them. But there was that incident between CM Punk and Kurt Angle earlier the night. Before they give that update, they have received the green light to show footage that was captured by Impact Wrestling cameras. They followed CM Punk, and earlier today he caused a huge scene due to not being allowed access to Kurt Angle's office. There were reports which, from his actions in the footage and from what we see on the screen, it does appear to be the case that CM Punk threatened to leave the building early in the night, refusing to compete unless his demands were met. Whatever happened between then and now, we do see footage that shows that Kurt Angle did eventually speak to CM Punk, allowing him into his office, although the content of their conversation is currently unknown. Nonetheless, a discontented CM Punk did agree to compete, with the main event confirmed to be going ahead as scheduled by Kurt Angle, who gives a brief address to the viewers. He says that of course this incident has gone ahead, but he wants to assure fans that they are getting their advertised Impact World Championship match. And we're just sort of playing off again the turbulent backstage environment, particularly led by CM Punk. He loves to stir the pot. Him and his right hand man, who, if you remember, is suspended for tonight, Samoa Joe, serving a 30-day suspension for choking out Kurt Angle. They have been the main instigators of the issues that Kurt Angle has been having. So again, as we see basically by which stories are advanced, the World Championship storyline does get a little bit of a different beat to it, but also the storyline about Kurt Angle being in charge is also a thread throughout tonight's show. I do think it's going to be a huge night this Thursday on Impact, so I did want to at least try to continue to build the anticipation to that while not taking the shine and the attention off what is going to be a huge main event match. We then get the fourth championship match of the night, I believe. Awesome Kong and Rosita defeating Taylor Wilde and Sarita. Awesome Kong the decisive factor. She pins Sarita following a sit-out powerbomb, also known as the Kong Bomb. Awesome Kong and Rosita make defense number 5, although some of those defenses were made with Adja Kong by Awesome Kong. Of the Knockouts Tag Team Championships, we see Kong doing really well, as does Sarita there. Sometimes I feel these, I suppose it depends on the booking notes and the type of match and things like that, but sometimes I feel like Sarita doesn't do that well, sometimes she does really well. I might just be misremembering because it's been so long, but actually considering the average of tonight's match ratings, that's actually pretty good. I'm surprised by that and pleased by it. The Knockouts Tag Team Champions stand tall following the match. They still hold the titles, that odd couple as we've been very much putting them over as. That's their whole gimmick. We then go into a video package that looks back at the rivalry between Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin, and I'm really annoyed that this loses heat to what I think has been a decently built storyline between these two. Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas, their long-term friendship came to an end last month at Against All Odds. After defeat in an Impact World Tag Team Championships match, Charlie Haas turned on his partner, the first of multiple brutal attacks on his former best friend, a humiliating 2-minute defeat to Benjamin just 4 nights after he turned on him, only added to the bitterness and rage of Haas, and what we've seen since then is the result of that. From there, things have become increasingly personal between the two of them, with their mentor Kurt Angle becoming involved on occasions. He, of course, has a personal investment in this. He should be, I suppose, neutral and should try and keep his emotions out of things, but that's another thing that we've seen. Kurt Angle, who is one of the most fiery individuals in professional wrestling, of course he's going to struggle to keep his emotions out of things. We do get a bit of sort of pre-recorded, pre-taped footage from Kurt Angle, because he's speaking about the two men, about how close they previously were, and how he understands just how much this means to the two men. He doesn't understand why Charlie Haas did what he did, but he's got to try and keep himself out of this despite his very, very strong feelings. Footage then shows their confrontation from this Thursday's Impact Wrestling, where the words of Shelton Benjamin got under the skin of Charlie Haas. A justified reaction from Charlie Haas, you would say, as Shelton Benjamin said that the two men were as close as brothers, but they will compete tonight as far away as possible from looking like family. They are enemies, and it's going to be a highly charged match, especially when the only way to win is to render your opponent unable to compete, and they will have to give up. This is a submissions match, and I'm hoping it's a good rating. I think it's the equal best match of the night so far, so pleased with that, despite Charlie Haas only getting a 58 in ring performance and a 76. We have definitely seen better from Shelton Benjamin in the past. I did hope that this would sneak into the 80s. It's only 1 point off, so I'm not going to worry too much, and despite being a submission match between two really good technical wrestlers, this is a fight, make no mistake about it. The submission stipulation is there, but they just want to get their hands on each other, and it is a violent match. There are no countouts, so they go all around the ringside area, throwing each other into things, and we really want it to be a brawl-based match. Really, Benjamin using his athleticism, Haas showing his intensity, and I think this would be a great match that comes together. Eventually, Charlie Haas uses the crutch, which he does bring with him during his entrance. I probably should have mentioned that earlier, but he places it at ringside. He then uses Shelton Benjamin's crutch against him, digging into that knee, and absolutely mangles and distorts the crutch. Imagine what that's doing to the inside of Shelton Benjamin's already far from 100% leg, and eventually Haas locks in a Haas of pain, and Shelton Benjamin's refusing to give up, but he's just wrenching back and wrenching back. Hopefully we can get a pretty brutal visual on this, a crutch-assisted Haas of pain, and eventually, while he doesn't tap, the referee is asking Shelton Benjamin, almost pleading with him, telling him, you've got to give up, you cannot withstand this pain anymore, otherwise you're going to be in serious pain. And Benjamin eventually nods his head, he gives up, and Charlie Haas defeats Shelton Benjamin, so rewriting the history on that humiliating defeat from a couple of weeks ago. He beats his former partner, and a hugely cathartic moment for Charlie Haas, but he's the heel in this, so it's no heroic victory for him, and he proves this further by refusing to release the brutal hold that he has Shelton Benjamin locked in. Even after the bell is rung, he has completely flipped. He has completely lost his mind, perhaps particularly spurred on by the words of Benjamin from Thursday, and he is increasing that torture, pulling back and pulling back. His face shows that he has no intent of letting go. Eventually, multiple referees are able to separate the two men, with Charlie Haas keeping a hold of that now mangled crutch as he walks away victorious. Once he reaches the top of the ramp, he raises both arms in the air, feeling vindicated and proud of what he has just done. The commentators speculate on the condition of Shelton Benjamin's already damaged knee. It wasn't in good shape coming into the match, so imagine what after 20 minutes of being targeted, and then the brutal post-match continuation. He's clearly going to be in a bad condition. We look at the state of that crutch. Shelton Benjamin is probably in even worse shape than that. Due to the severity and the length of time that hold was locked in, there is severe concern for Shelton Benjamin, who is unable to return to his feet of his own accord. Shelton Benjamin is shown to be in serious pain as medical personnel work on his knee. The commentators feel fairly certain that we are dealing with a serious injury for Shelton Benjamin, delivered at the hands of his former friend, and they still can't quite get their head around how these men can go from being as close as they were to now being the most bitter enemies. And I think whether people agree with the breakup of this team, I always thought in my mind from when I brought them in, they would eventually be tag team champions, but them not doing that, taking that away, I just think it adds another layer to this storyline. The hatred now between them is something that I think has put them both on another level. Sure, they were great wrestlers and their gimmick was that we're a really great tag team, but now I think that we're going to get so much more out of these two long term, and I'm very, very happy with how that match and the post-match has gone, and what we've got next with these two I think is going to be really interesting, and to be fair, the most interesting that either of them have been since coming to the company. We then of course take time to discuss the events of the night before going into that main event, and I have to say I'm not particularly happy with this. AJ and Punk have done really well. I think, to be fair, everyone's done about what you'd expect, but it's only an 81. Now that's a good match, don't get me wrong, superb wrestling and great heat. It's just the fact that this is going to be, I think, one of the lower rated pay-per-views that we've done in some time. And the booking of this match did actually have to change because a certain person involved complained. Can you guess who out of these four men is most likely to have something to moan about? I'm not going to say just yet, but the finish comes as Jay Lethal and CM Punk form a temporary alliance. Punk very much telling Jay Lethal what to do, but the idea here is that if you get rid of the other two, then perhaps we could end up in a situation where it's those two fighting out, and 1v1 is certainly better odds for Jay Lethal than a 4-way. And after both dealing with AJ Styles and throwing him over the guardrail into the crowd, CM Punk and Jay Lethal get to work on Jeff Hardy. Jeff Hardy fights back valiantly, but ends up in a 2-on-1 situation. Jay Lethal has him with his arms behind his back. As CM Punk goes to get the Impact World Championship, he is going to crack it over the skull of Jeff Hardy and take him out. However, as he sets up to do that, and this is where I had to change the booking, the lights go out. When they come back up, the icon Sting, he has been screwed over as much as anybody by CM Punk, and he has been a constant thorn in the Impact World Champion's side. He takes him from behind, hits a scorpion death drop and drags him out of the ring. Jeff Hardy is then able to low blow Jay Lethal from behind, hit him with a twist of fate before heading to the top rope for a swanton bomb. In 20 minutes and 30 seconds, Jeff Hardy pins Jay Lethal to become the new Impact World Champion. Jay Lethal, the weak link, and it's only an 81. You can't really complain too much about, but I'm not hugely over the moon with it, and I think that's just because I know that the overall pay-per-view isn't going to be that good either. Jeff Hardy celebrates becoming the Impact World Champion, a huge celebration for him. Sting, I didn't actually put him on screen here, but he should have returned to the ring to raise the arm of Jeff Hardy. They've been so closely associated for over 2 years now, or coming up for 2 years now. So Sting being part of this huge moment for Jeff Hardy, a redemptive moment. Finally, 2.25 years into coming back to Impact Wrestling, or TNA as it was then, Jeff Hardy is the world champion. Now, this may be a decision that some people agree or disagree with. Obviously, he's had his personal issues, so can you rely on Jeff Hardy? Well, my argument is that since he had that one incident and we did punish him for that, he hasn't had a repeat. So I'm hoping now that at least for these next few months we can rely on Jeff Hardy. And again, it's one of those things that you might look at now and think we're cutting CM Punk's reign short for Jeff Hardy, but it's all about what I have planned long term. This piece has to be in place for the bigger picture, and hopefully over the next few months that will become very clear. We've got an 80 rating, so it's not a bad show by any means. Nobody's buying the pay-per-view and is going to feel shortchanged, I wouldn't expect, but it's not necessarily the best ever. We're going to praise these two losers in the main event despite putting on much better performances than pretty much everybody else. And I wanted to say Charlie Haas then, but he wasn't really the best. I'm just looking back through my notes here, and I think it was Bryan Danielson. I know it's pretty obvious. I'd imagine that a large percentage of my post-show speeches have gone to these guys, but it is what it is. The best guys on your roster are often going to be the ones that you single out for praise, and hopefully the other men and women in the back are going to look at them and think, hey, I could get a praise. Yeah, it's not really that much of an incentive, is it? But we're all about raising the bar and continuing these standards. Kurt Angle, wow. That's what you call going behind somebody's back. What a backstabber. ITV1 not happy. Kurt Angle slagging off Charlie Haas. I never thought I'd see the day. This pay-per-view now rated as above average, but that is now the first 3 months of Impact Wrestling done, and as I've said, the plan is to finish this at Slammiversary 2012, and that means we've got 3 months left. Now what I'm going to do, obviously, between now and the next show is I've got a pen and a notebook. I'm not even doing my notes on Google Drive for this because I really want to map out and lay out as good as I can this next 3 months. Of course, injuries and maybe people leaving, all these different things can still come into play, of course, but I want this last 3 months to be hopefully the best 3 months that I've ever booked, and the way I think to do that is to try and meticulously plan things out. Things can change, storylines can go in different directions, but at least if we've got a very strong, solid framework, we can work towards something that I think is going to be very, very special. Huge things coming, starting on this Thursday's Impact. Then we've got massive things planned for Lockdown, Sacrifice in between then. It's just going to be huge show after huge show after huge show, and I hope that you'll join me for them. Thank you for joining me for Destination X 2012, and I'll be back hopefully soon for the next video.